Okay, so webinar has begun and folks are filing in. Just wanted to start by thanking everyone for registering to join us today for the second installment of REAP's Fall Energy Speaker Series, an array of opportunities, solar in Alaska. I know, as always, folks are probably hopping from one Zoom call to the next or tuning in remotely, and so we'll give a few moments for folks to join us here and begin with the land acknowledgement. As always, we want to be mindful of the lands that we're on, and especially today on the first day of Native American Heritage Month, we want to recognize that REAP staff work on the unceded lands of Alaska Native peoples, and in particular, I'm hosting this webinar from Dena'ina Elnena. REAP is proud to follow the lead of generations of Indigenous peoples who have stewarded these lands for generations and whose approach we seek to emulate in building a just transition to Alaska's sustainable energy future. So with that grounding, I'll offer a few logistical notes, but also want to encourage folks to introduce themselves, their names, perhaps their affiliations, and the native lands that they're joining from today in the chat. Also want to officially welcome you all and thank our sponsors, firstly, Cook Inlet Region, Inc., or CIRI, as well as the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. This webinar wouldn't be possible without their support, and so we are greatly appreciative of their financial support for this series. And also another logistical note, we're going to hop in here pretty quickly and have sort of a 40-minute discussion with these Alaskan energy experts before opening it up for 10 or 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. If you could log your questions using the Q&A function, that'll be the easiest way for me to track them and make sure that we get those to our panelists. And then just to answer one popular question at the get, this will be recorded and made available on the REAP YouTube channel afterwards, so no need to try and record it yourselves or try and remember specific details. You can access those afterwards. But wanted to introduce myself and our organization to kick it off. My name is Donovan. I'm the outreach director for Renewable Energy Alaska Project. REAP is a statewide nonprofit organization dedicated to the mission of increasing the development of renewable energy and energy efficiency to gather clean energy in Alaska. And we do that through collaboration, education, training, and advocacy. We are a member-based organization, and our diverse coalition of over 60 dues-paying members is comprised of renewable energy developers, businesses, conservation and consumer groups, electric utilities, Alaska Native entities, local governments, educational institutions, really just a broad swath of organizations and stakeholders who are committed to that vision and that mission. And a big part of REAP's work, which spans each of those tactical means by which we fulfill our mission, is hosting the Alaska Network for Energy Education and Employment, or ANEEE. And so we're fortunate to have REAP's ANEEE director, Chris McConnell, here with us today, moderating this panel, as I mentioned, of these really impressive Alaskan energy experts. So I'll step out of his way and invite Chris to please kick it off by telling the attendants a bit about yourself and ANEEE.
Thank you, Donovan. We had a side bet that Donovan was not going to deliver his intro in under 4 minutes. I owe him an Urban Green sandwich, for the record. Thanks for joining, and thanks to the panelists. My name is Chris McConnell, as Donovan said, and yeah, I direct ANEEE, Alaska Network of Energy, Education, and Employment, and work alongside my colleague Jenny Stars, who is the network coordinator. And essentially, ANEEE looks to anywhere Alaskans are getting energy literacy and energy training. We map that and look at the different stakeholders and try to connect those stakeholders to make sure conversations are being had around training, around workforce development, and occasionally partner with some of those stakeholders to fill those gaps. A big part of ANEEE is keeping a good eye on what's happening in the clean energy industry. And that is why I'm excited to talk to each of these panelists here. I think that, you know, things scale up differently in Alaska, and nobody knows that better than Alaskans. And I think nobody perhaps knows that better than Alaskans that run their own businesses. So these are three individuals who are working the solar industry and have hung their own shingle. And so I think in terms of workforce, it'll be interesting to hear both the specific work they do and how they manage to run businesses in Alaska. A little context maybe on workforce in Alaska. I like to point out maybe our biggest workforce boom, of course, were the pipeline days. So I'll read a little bit here. In 1977, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline Project was fully staffed with 28,062 workers. It took 3 years to complete, and more than 70,000 people were employed in one way or another during those 3 years. The population of Alaska in 1977, 409,000 people. The working age population, 250,000. So that was 25% of Alaska's working age population was working on the pipeline. That is a workforce development boom. By contrast, our Alaska clean energy, and specifically solar, is relatively new in terms of a burgeoning industry. But some numbers on clean energy innovation in Alaska. Our renewable energy workforce is a little bit less than 700 people, and that's 0.2% of the 320,000 people working in the state today. That's the smallest workforce in the nation. And now, by comparison, curiously enough, there are currently 793 people working to keep the pipeline going today. So our clean energy and the remaining pipeline staff are neck and neck, a good one to watch. So I guess that is by way of saying that things do scale up a little bit different in Alaska, and the challenges are unique, and the approaches to solving those challenges are unique. So what I'd like to do is just go around the horn here and introduce each of our panelists. And if I could ask them to sort of describe their own personal workforce trajectory and maybe the project that have brought them to the panel today. So first up is Jenn Miller. She is the CEO of Renewable Energy IPP, and maybe on a lot of people's radar for the beautiful Willow Solar Farm that I'm sure many have read about and perhaps seen. Jenn, tell us how you got here today.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Chris and Donovan, for having me, and looking forward to this discussion. And so, yeah, I actually grew up in Alaska in Eagle River, went to college in Idaho to get my mechanical engineering degree, and then came back to the state 2002 to work for BP as an engineer, and worked in oil and gas, both for BP and smaller independents, for almost 15 years. And so I did a lot, initially the early part of my career was a lot of technical, running calculations and analysis. And then later in my career, I switched over into project management. And anyways, those are really complementary and I've used all those skills as I've moved into solar, because really it's all the energy industry and you're doing executing technical projects. And so I was very pleased to see that a lot of those skills transferred. And how we got started, Renewable IPP, we're affectionately called RIP for short. And so otherwise it's a bit of a mouthful. But anyways, how we got started is actually myself and a couple of my partners, we were doing DIY projects, putting solar in our houses back in 2017. And started with 5 panels on our house. And man, this was actually like such a simple technology. And we thought the economics looked pretty good, and we wanted to have a much bigger impact and, to do more. And so we said, okay, we have a really small team, and how do you, in project work, all projects have the same number of steps, no matter if it's a small project or a large project. And so we said, okay, let's just try and focus on doing like 1 or 2 really big projects to, have the biggest impact and get good economies of scale, as opposed to trying to do a lot of small projects. And so that was kind of more our fit, given our backgrounds and the amount of time we have when we started. And so Renewable IPP was born. It was myself and my 3 business partners. We're all engineers by background from the oil and gas industry. And 2018, we did our first pilot project, which was 140 kilowatts in Willow. It was the first commercial solar farm in Alaska. A year later, we turned around a 1.2 megawatt expansion in Willow. And then we just completed our 8.5 megawatt solar farm in Houston, Alaska, this past summer. And so very glad to be on the end of that project. And our company, we handle our projects cradle to grave. And so we develop the project, which is finding land, financing, and working the contract with the utility to bring that project together. Then we turn around and put on our engineering and construction hats and build it. And then we are the long-term contract operator and maintenance company. And so it really helps build trust, that you're kind of dealing with one partner that really cares. there's one overhead fee, and then we kind of look all across all the project phases to maximize value. So anyways, probably too long, but here I am. Thanks for having me, and we'll hand it back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Jen. Not too long at all, and we will return to you for some questions. Ben May is up next of Alaska Solar, and Ben has had a real interesting career trajectory through renewable energy. I'll let you, Ben, introduce yourself and maybe hit some of those highlights of how you started Alaska Solar.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Donovan, and thanks to Reek for all the work that you do in renewables. So yeah, I have a varied resume. It's true. So I grew up in Washington, Idaho. In my mid-20s, I came to Alaska in 1991, and I was using my degree in geology to work for the U.S. Geological Survey. Fell in love with Alaska, fell in love with the mountains, got into mountaineering, found I was incapable of sitting at a desk in my mid-20s, and went out and did outdoor education using the mountaineering. Supported myself doing construction, which my family did a lot of. And so the science and the construction came together have come together for me in many good ways, including getting hired to go to McMurdo. I could build things in really harsh places and deal with the logistics. And that helped me get my first renewables job, which I had wanted to do since college. And that was a project manager with a wind company down south of Bethel. So Kongaganak, Tuntatuliak, Quingilingok, and then a bit in Kipnuk and Trefornik. So yeah, great projects, deep dive, high penetration into those villages, trying to use battery and supply side regulation. So great stuff, pioneering stuff, and so it was good. That came to an end for me, and I shifted to my own business in 2016, starting Anchorage Solar, which has become Alaska Solar now. We do residential, commercial, small scale, utility scale solar. We do sales. Yeah, Jen, you talked about cradle to grave, sales through the permitting and applications, installation, monitoring, and then all the final bits of the handoff for our customers. And then we're available for troubleshooting if it comes to that. And God, I love solar because it's unlike wind. It doesn't have any moving parts. The amount of troubleshooting is so much less. It's so much less painful. And so, yeah, the success rate of getting people the return on investment that was promised is so much better with the simplicity of solar. And yeah, it's gone way better than I expected. By coming in 2016, I joined right when the panels had ended that precipitous drop of about 85–90% in the cost. And because of that, it was a viable, good return on investment for my customers, and therefore they wanted to do it. And so I was able to my first few people were believing in that, and then they found that they actually got the return on investment promised. And then trust in the process grew and grew. So just to talk about the trajectory a little bit, just to talk about workforce, 2016, 8 systems, 2017, 15 systems, 2018, 26 systems. So doubled and then quadrupled in 2 years. That trust was building. I had pretty much no employees the first 2 years. And then when we got to 62 systems in 2018, really had to shift to hiring and having a workforce. And then we doubled again in 2019, and we've kind of stayed at that size with more incremental growth, like 10–15% growth after that. 100 to 120 systems, and the size of the systems went from about 12 panels to about 20 panels. The size of our workforce has been This last year, 18 employees. And I just want to mention there are 3 other similar companies to myself that operate in South Central. So I'm not alone. This is an industry that has grown, as many people started about when I did. Chris, you covered the amount of labor that's in renewables. I just wanted to mention that for every dollar spent in solar or renewables, it's about 43 cents that has additional value out in the economy. We were talking before the program that we use North Coast, and so North Coast is working for us every day, delivering, getting things together. That's a really solid example of how there's more employment, more money coming from than just our particular company. And the money goes right back in. Our people don't leave. They're around doing a season of about 8 months, and so they're Alaskans, and so the money stays in Alaska and is spent here. So, moving forward, I want to talk about the next year because the amount of buzz around the IRA Act is pretty awesome and terrifying at the same time. For next year, I see the continued demand. We're hitting about 1 megawatt of solar in the last couple of years per year, and then there's solar for all. Looks like probably 50 million for disadvantaged rail belt residential customers, starting around 2024, 2025. And then another 50 million for rural projects from that solar for all. And then there's other people, ANTHC, I've heard they're also applying for some of those funds for rural. The Alaska Green Bank is likely, I think most people are pretty optimistic that's going to pass. That's going to generate, will allow more capital to come into solar. And I'm sure there's many things I don't know about yet. The amount of interest.
I think there is. I think the
Right.
money, follow the money part of this conversation, I think is coming and is going to be interesting and worth noting that the 49 other states are also sharing in that, and that puts a pinch on the Alaska workforce where sometimes we've had money and they flow up here. But I want to circle back to that, but I want to bring in Kolt and Amanda Garvey of Sunstone Electric. Kolt, you've gone to a still image. Are we still with you, or there he is?
Here.
And
Hot Springs, Alaska, where it's cold. I'm Kolt Garvey. I'm the co-owner of Sunstone Electric and Renewable Energy, and my wife is over here. She doesn't want me to show her face, but I'm going to because she's the smart one. Yeah, she's the I'm the wheels and she's the motor. So we are solar builders, and we assist with design, obviously. Like we got our start. I'm born and raised in Alaska. I was born in Wrangell. I grew up on Prince of Wales Island in Craig and Klawock, and I went to college for electrical engineering at UAF, and decided that engineering was boring and I wanted to build. So I joined the IBEW, and that's the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, for those that don't know. Did my apprenticeship through them, and then really wanted to bring back what I had to the communities that I grew up in. So I took a job with Alaskan Operations and Maintenance Department. And actually, if you don't mind, now that you've seen my face, I'm going to go back off because we're on Starlink, and I think it'll be better for our quality if we turn the video off. So
sounds
sorry,
good.
sorry everybody, but here's my face. That's all you get. And then actually, that's where Amanda and I met, is at ANTHC, and they had a couple of small solar projects. And we were hooked from then on, both of us. And we had talked often about installing more solar everywhere. And then then we got married and we started this business together. It's an electrical contracting business, but we specialize in system controls, and we just started specializing in the last year and a half in solar because we just really like it. And people kept on calling us asking for it, and so we built several systems with ANTHC. They had a few projects and then they kind of got out of it, so we wanted to continue to build solar. So we started our own, and here we are today. We do most of our projects are in rural Alaska, just because that's kind of what I always wanted to do. I wanted to leave the village, get knowledge, and bring it back to the villages any way I could. So that is my main focus. And luckily I have somebody here supporting me in that focus. So she does all the planning, and all the business work and all the paperwork, and like I said, I'm just the wheels. I just put stuff on walls and pull wire into pipes, and we right now we are in Manly Hot Springs doing a 250 kW system. Earlier this year we did a pilot project 50 kW in Galena to prep for their large, I forget how big the full system is. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's I think 26 arrays. And then before that we were in Noatak for that solar project. And then before that, this year, we were in Kotzebue for the phase 2 of that project, and that was 700 kW, 600, just over 650 kW, 700, somewhere in there. And those are the 4 solar projects we worked on this year for the various groups in those areas. And that's what we plan on doing and continue to do. We have plenty to say about the workforce out here. So, but I will keep ours brief so that we can get on.
Well, Kolt, I'm gonna jump in on you because I think that as an electrician, you represent that shortage in the state. Is we know nationwide the graying of the utility workforce of most of the trades, so the baby boomers aging out, and there's just not as many bodies coming up behind. And Alaska, because of our population, we often feel that pinch. So I think it's really interesting. Kolt's perspective is both hanging a shingle with Amanda, but also being in demand as an electrician. And so I wonder if you could speak, Kolt, and then we'll kind of reverse process back through our panelists. But Kolt, talk to us about when you hit the ground in a rural Alaska community, who is the crew? What is the workforce, and what are some of the training processes, elements? Are those short-term positions? Is that day labor? Go anywhere you want with that one.
Yeah. This is my favorite thing to talk about, actually, because this is the whole plan, right? And I'm belly laughing right now a little bit because of the representing the electricians. I don't think I do a very good job of that, but when we hit the ground in a community, the first thing we do is we try and hire half of our crew from the local labor pool. For one, because ANEEE and Sunstone Electric, ANEEE being Alaska Native Renewable Industries, who is the group that we're doing most of our projects with right now. We want to make sure that we have half of our crew as local Alaskan Native hires in those communities. One, because we keep that money and that training in the community. And that's the biggest agreement we have, is that we want to keep 50% of our crew local labor. Second is because when we leave, and this is my thing, we have a few days where we stay behind just for training regiments for those laborers and whoever else in the community that wants to be part of it, where we go over those systems and we train those community members to kind of keep track of the system and be operators of that system and kind of buy into that system and be part of it. That system is going into that community just like a water treatment plant or a power plant or anything else, and we are not doing that system or the good people who live there any justice by just walking away from it and hoping that they can do a good job. So part of the reason we hire half of our crew on as local labor is because we want to make sure we leave qualified, trained individuals to at least be able to monitor that system and operate it a little bit, and pass things on to us. We do call in and checks, weekly or bi-weekly, depending on the system. And we have warranty periods where we go out and we make sure those things stay running for the first 2 years. And then like our group, Amanda and I and whoever works for us, we also do maintenance on those systems. So if they have problems after that goes in, we fly out and we maintain those systems. Even systems we don't install, we maintain that. We got our education through Solar Energy International, who are really, really good friends of ours, who we're actually going to be instructors for this spring. We finish our final course for it, so we will be SEI instructors for that. And all of that culminates in just being able to make sure that those systems operate properly, be maintained properly, and last for that 25-year design life that we designed for them. The problem that we're having is the people that we can hire to do skilled trades work like electricians and stuff like that are pretty hard to come by. And the work that they do is very dangerous. Remember that these are utility-sized production systems, and it's unsafe for unqualified individuals to be operating or installing those systems. And there is a shortage of people like me right now, but there isn't an unwillingness to do it. I've talked to 100 electricians who want to get involved. They don't know how. They want to be trained. They know the work is there. Most of them don't hate electricity, so they don't fear it, and they don't hate that these systems are going in. They're not just backed by big oil and all that nonsense. They want to do it. They just don't know where to start. They don't know where to get the training, and they don't know who to go to. And also the people who are offering electricians jobs are paying, not enough to those electricians. I constantly see job offerings for $35 an hour or whatever, and no electrician that I know that's qualified to do that stuff is going to work for that. So they just don't see a reason to hop in there for dimes and nickels when they can work for BP or Alaskan Native Tribal Health or somebody like that for more than that. So and it's such a budding industry right now that we, like a lot of companies, are trying to build these systems for inexpensive and get them in, and they can't offer things like health benefits and stuff like that, like a lot of bigger corporations can. So yeah, that's kind of the pinch point for us. We have absolutely no problem hiring local labor, and actually we take a lot of our local labor, and like we have people from our NOAATAC project right now here in Manly Hot Springs installing for us. They just liked it so much they wanted to continue working, so they're part of the permanent.
I'm sure the hot springs had nothing to do with that decision. Kolt, I'm gonna jump in here. You had mentioned Solar Energy International, and I want to give a plug for University of Alaska Fairbanks Bristol Bay campus for hosting and securing a Department of Energy grant to do a train the trainer with that curriculum. So that brings us to create more qualified solar install instructors, which Kolt mentioned there. And I'm going to transition over to Ben here in terms of your crew, your staff, the training you do in-house, and some of the pinch points or opportunities you see, Ben. And also worth noting, Ben hung up his boots on November 1st, the construction season being a little bit short here. So congratulations, Ben, from an undisclosed sunny location, despite that background. But it's another pinch point that a lot of this work has to be done in fewer months.
Yes. Yeah, we go from November 15 to November 1, and then we take a much needed break. It's we liken it to fishing, but maybe longer and maybe not quite so stressful. But yeah, we by the time November 1 comes around, we're pretty exhausted. So yeah, we've been getting as much solar up as we can, because it just gets unsafe and unproductive to do short days and icy roofs. So Kolt, what you talked about in the village, I really want to give a shout out to that and reinforce that. When we did the wind turbines, it was essential that we had local labor build those wind turbines. They're high, they're scary, and we did the training, and we got people ready with fall protection training, and they were the ones that the crane brought the big chunks of steel down, and they drove the bolts home and locked those towers in place. And so that was such an achievement, and I think it built expertise and confidence that was so necessary to do the best they could to keep those wind turbines running in the long term. And so, yeah, whatever success they've had, I think it's because of the local labor. And I was often the only one in the village, and then all local labor. So that it can be done, it works, and it's important. With Alaska Solar, we have the advantage of being in South Central Alaska, and the people want to work in this industry. I'm getting college-educated people that want to be on the roof. I had a couple of engineers that worked for me for a year because they couldn't sit behind a desk anymore. So I get good people. Sometimes that's a detriment because then they move on to go do something else. So it's a mixed bag. I can hire people pretty quickly. They don't always stick around. Yeah, I've been able to build a workforce, and the on-the-job training was pretty straightforward. Residential commercial solar there's some variation on each roof, what kind of mounts you're using, that sort of thing. But it's pretty close to Legos these days. It's the equipment is really efficient and really good, and the waterproofing is good, and so you can have a lot of confidence. We can have somebody that's able to learn quickly, be pretty productive within a couple of weeks. And so on the job has worked pretty well. And I think we should shout that out. It doesn't have to be some big program. And so an introduction and a willingness and an enthusiasm for the mission, that is my number one question in the interview is what's your motivation to work in solar? And so that has been key for us. We have a great crew. We support each other. We're all mission focused. So, and I think that the biggest struggle has been with the electricians. So it's because we hired subcontractors to do that, and it was really hard to get somebody to show up consistently and when we need them. And projects would sit for months, and our customers would, reasonably get quite cranky about that. And we just needed somebody that we had control of the schedule. So just this last year, we hired 2 people in-house and shifted over to having electricians in-house. And that's been a big relief to do that. It takes on more responsibility, and we need to keep them busy. So we're working on that now. But that's been a success. Again, I think the mission-driven nature of our company and the people wanting to work in solar has helped us a little bit, even in getting electricians. Chris, you asked me yesterday at their age, I think mid-30s and mid-40s for these 2 people. And so we're kind of lucky in that regard as well. But I do want to say electricians do not want to be on the roof. They want to be doing the smart stuff down on the ground. And they're not really interested in getting fall protection training. So we have zero luck in getting electricians up on a roof. And state statute currently requires all electrical installations to be done by or directly supervised by an electrician. And so there's this easy Lego nature of the stuff coming together, and yet there's this requirement that is saying that it has to be supervised by somebody who's really too smart and uninterested in doing that work. So that we need to get out of our own way. And allow solar techs to do what they're good at and allow electricians to do what they're good at on the ground. And then we'll have a synergy where it's more efficient and we can do more solar, entice more customers because the price drops if we do it smarter. So it's my little pitch for kind of developing the solar tech niche, and making that part of Alaska policy regulation.
To be clear, Ben, you're talking about parts of the install that do not entail high voltage, or what level of voltage?
Correct. Yeah. It's the racking up on the roof. Typically, the racking, the microinverters, and then the cable that connects the microinverter is called trunk cable. It's pre-built. It's just ready to go. It's like an extension cord with a bunch of plugs in it. These plugs snap lock together. It's safer than plugging in an outlet refrigerator because it locks together. The plus only plugs into the plus, and the minus only plugs into the minus. It's really made to go efficiently and quickly and safely. And components have any electrical charge to them while you're working with them. The beauty of solar panels is if they're not connected, they're not actually making power. It's absorbed within the solar panel. And the beauty of the microinverters is if they don't perceive any electrical coming in, it won't send any out. So it's UL listed to be dead when the circuit is off. So it's extremely safe to work with, and so it's safe for the crew, and it's safe for the customer later because it's pretty foolproof. So.
And mindful of time, and we could go down so many wormholes here, and there are a lot of other people in this space. So there, of course, is the IBEW. There's Renewable Energy Services, Arctic Solar Ventures, and Edwin Byfeld with Alaska Native Renewables. And I think that this is a great conversation that I think the general public should be aware that there are a lot of people thinking of this, and it's a burgeoning industry. A lot of people did not think solar was viable in Alaska. And I think the maybe fact that I like hearing is that every place on planet Earth gets the same amount of sun. It's just Alaska gets an especially large dose in a short period of time. And Jen, going to utility scale solar, I'm very interested in just sort of the sort of successful curve that you're on here in terms of coming from a brainchild to actual human beings working alongside you and putting steel on the ground. How did you staff up?
Yeah, so we actually, it was really interesting hearing both Ben and Kolt talk about, I don't want to be chained to a desk and I want to get in the field. And what's kind of interesting, just if we look at our, I don't know, even just, worldwide, what's going on. The last couple decades, a lot of the economic development was tied to software development and computers and desks. And I think what's really exciting about what's ahead of us is where there is a really, a strong need for infrastructure again, and that means building and construction. And so, yeah, anyways, it was just really interesting hearing everybody kind of had a common thread of wanting to get to the field and build things again. And even for my time in Prudhoe, I worked some construction projects, but it was largely after the big pipeline had been built, the facilities were built, and you're like, oh, I want to be part of that, And anyways, it was so when we started with the 4 partners back in 2017 and we did our pilot project in 2018, we built that with the 4 partners ourselves. And it was a great way to, especially as engineers, you're drawing things in 2D and you're like, yeah, this is totally going to work. It's going to be great. And then you get out there like, why did we specify welding? This is so stupid. We should be bolting this together. And so it's great because we got all that hands-on experience of what does it take to put the foundation piles in? What does it take to put all the racking together? And then you just it's so, I think we undervalue as society that field knowledge. And it's maybe you're not reading something and gaining new knowledge every 2 minutes or something, but it's amazing how when you have that tactile experience of building and then you go back to do something else and you go, you'll never forget it. You'll never forget what, and you'll be working on a new design and that knowledge comes in. And I just, I'm excited to see, I saw a recent article about the Anchorage School District announcing academies again to kind of get back to construction and working in the field. And yeah, I just hope that going forward, we can start to value that work a lot more and hold it equal with other jobs and skill sets. But anyways, so yeah, we built our first project ourselves. And then when we did the expansion, I was like, okay, that will definitely kill us if we try and do that ourselves. And so that's when we became a licensed general contractor and hired, and yeah, for all of our projects, we've always hired local labor, and same with the sentiments that Kolt and Ben brought up is, I mean, just building that community pride in that project, in that generation site. And then again, it's like, okay, if this thing's, you know, and they are very simple to operate, but having people that care about that and have that ownership is really critical. And so, and we've named our projects after the communities they're in, you know, so we've got the Willow Solar Farm, Houston Solar Farm. So part of that's probably a lack of our creativity as engineers. And the other part is having that community pride. And so, yeah, so we hired 13 employees to do the Willow expansion, and then carried some of those employees over to do the operation and maintenance. And we have one employee, Grace Hill, who's been with us since 2019, and, like, you know, she troubleshoots inverters. She does all of our snow, like, does snow blowing and does vegetation management, and like she's just she's phenomenal. And anyways, and then that takes us to the Houston Solar Farm was built over 2 seasons, so fall of 22 and spring summer of 23. And again, we hired all local labor for that. And then, you know, for all of our projects, even though we're growing the team, the owners we're always out there, we're part of the build. And the big part is like figuring out, solar is great. I think Ben's dead on. I mean, on the job training, I mean, solar, it's great to have these distributed resources built with local labor. That's such a economic benefit. But because solar is so repeatable, and we always say, like, oh, you know, you design one row, you build one row, now you know how to do all of them. And it's really true. And so it's, I think for panels this summer, the first panels were getting installed around like 1 panel every 4 minutes. And then like within days, then it's, or like honestly, probably by the afternoon, crews would get it down and they were doing like a panel every 2 minutes. And then we had a record, I think, of a panel every 30 seconds, but not all day. And so it's really cool just to see, because it is repetitive work. The crews, you know, first we're like, hey, you know, we think this is the most efficient method, and we do our on-the-job training, we go through hazard training. And then the crews, like, they start doing it and they're like, actually, you know what would be better? And then like, we're like, oh man, you're better at this than we are, you know? But it's really rewarding. And for me, I always say too, like, the environmental benefit of this business, like, I believe in it, and it's, you know, it's part of our passion. But sometimes it's like so far out, it's so intangible and you can't touch it or feel it, but hiring employees and like creating jobs that are local, that's actually, for me, that's the most rewarding part of this business. And I think what we've struggled with is when you do these big utility projects, it took us 3 years to develop the Houston Solar Farm project. So to get through that land financing, contracts, grid studies. And so as a small company trying to get on our feet, you know, how do you, it's been tough because we've had to kind of rehire. We've been able to carry some employees forward, but, you know, it's like, oh, if they were part of Willow and they happen to be available 3 years later. And so for us, we've been working to build our project pipeline, because ideally we'd like to get to where we're in construction every summer and have regular work. And so that's been a tough part of these like big utility projects is they take a lot of development years to get to go. And so the key is for us is to have a lot of projects in the pipeline that can go. And then, you know, in addition to our, you know, construction team, then in construction management, then we're also hiring project managers, because a lot of solar is, I always say, like, the solar projects are so simple compared to like an oil and gas project. Like, the designs are so unique in oil and gas, and the construction is more, you know, more complicated. Solar is simple, but the margins are just so lean. And like, that project has to be executed so well. And so you just need a lot of, and like when you invest in a solar project, it's low risk, low return. And so to keep it low risk though, it has to be delivered on budget and on schedule. And so, yeah, having a project manager that can really manage, seeing those long lead items way in advance to make sure they come on time, and knowing which ones that, like, they'll tell you it's going to be here in 16 weeks, but it's probably more like 20. And then managing the delivery process and logistics. So anyways, yeah, that's it for me.
Hey, Jen, at the peak, how many employees did you have going in the larger Houston?
We had 28.
All right.
Yeah, and so we started in the fall. We were kind of limited by how many pile drivers we had.
Right.
So fall of 22, we had 8 to 10 employees, and we honestly could have used more. And like, that was a lesson for me too, is, man, like, we need to hire about 50% more than we think. And because there's just things that people like come up and they can't make it that day, or whatever happens. And then you're always a little too optimistic on how many man hours it's going to take. And then I
call that supervisor syndrome.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And in summer of 23, we started with a crew of like 16 to 18. And then our racking ended up taking a lot longer to install than we thought. And so then we ended up doing like a huge hiring push to maintain our schedule. And so then we got grew up to 28, which, that's a lot. That's a big team. And like, when you're like, we were spread across 45 acres. And so to help answer questions or move things forward, that's so that's another thing too, is going forward, we're planning on a lot more foreman positions under the construction manager.
Great. I wonder, Kolt, when you looking from the workforce side and the money that Ben pointed out is going to be coming down, and so project pipeline, I wonder, Kolt, out in rural Alaska, what are you seeing in terms of opportunities and barriers of the communities themselves embracing solar, understanding that solar is viable, or is that a novelty? The expansion of solar in rural Alaska, I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Kolt actually just got stepped out to
Amanda. Awesome.
So this is Amanda pretending to be Kolt. Sorry, and he just stepped in, and they just asked about the barriers of solar expansion in rural Alaska.
The barriers of solar expansion in rural Alaska. Materials, really, like logistics is really the only barrier. The funding is there. We have no problems finding people. I find 2 to 3 electricians for every single job, whether they're local, whether they're out of the hub, or whether they're me and one of my electricians from Anchorage. So we don't really have any troubles with that. And we're installing, 0.5 megawatt systems with a couple of electricians and then a crew of from ANEEE. And they're excellent installers, and they make our job really easy. But I think the biggest pinch point for us is just logistics. For example, right now we're having problems having people get materials out to us from Fairbanks, and we're only 125 miles away. I mean, we're a 15-20 minute flight. So we don't really have any barriers, except I really want to get more people involved in building these projects locally from like the hub and the area. And it's really hard to get people to like just jump in and like a lot of people in villages, they're still stuck on natural gas and diesel, and you can't do it. And we've been doing diesel forever, and we've been doing natural gas forever, and how are we going to do it without that? And, education is like a big one. So I think education and logistics are the barriers.
And Kolt, what about Amanda, please jump in too here, is in rural Alaska, I've jumping around to different communities, there's differing opinions on that maybe standardization should be the direction folks go, so that certain battery vendors, certain systems, certain control systems, so that there are people that are trained up that can troubleshoot different systems around instead of, one-offs, and that depends on the designer and engineer, of course. But is that a pressing issue if you're going to be leaving this in the care of folks who are from the region? Would standardization help, I guess, is maybe the way to phrase it.
I have really strong opinions on this. So do you want to start?
Yeah, I guess I'll talk about it a little bit. Standardization, I think, would be great for the future. And I mean, most power plants kind of encounter this issue as well, where we're kind of trying to figure out, well, which generator works the best. And we've seen a number of different systems go in the village, and we've worked on different systems. And I think we're still trying to figure out, which controls work the best for Alaska and which batteries work best for Alaska. How even when you say like, well, let's drop a containerized system, there's different batteries controls, different ways you work the HVAC, because, the heating and maintaining a certain temperature and humidity environment inside those containerized systems, there's different ways of handling those. And I think we're kind of getting to a point where we're understanding what really works in Alaska, but the system that you're putting up in, the Kotzebue region is probably going to look a little bit different than the system you would put down in, the YK region. That's a discussion that we generally have with the engineers when we get the plan sets and we take a look at it and we say, hey, the way you've designed this is not going to work. I know it worked up in Kotzebue, but it's not going to work here.
Yeah, so 100% agree with everything she said. I am way more hard-nosed about this. And so I apologize if I sound a little bit militant on it. Education over standardization. So you educate the people to maintain those systems. You don't standardize it so it's easy for a few people to maintain those systems. There's, just like Amanda said, like you can't build the same system in Willow that you can in Manly Hot Springs. The infrastructure doesn't exist. The people infrastructure doesn't exist. There's a really excellent operator up here. He's the best. He's super nervous about the system, and we are doing everything we can to make it easy for him. But down on the rail belt, you can build everything that works for the rail belt and just assume that you're going to have a whole bunch of people who can maintain that system. You're going to have operators that you can train, and then they'll be able to train their operators later on. That doesn't exist in some of these rural communities. So continuing education. So you can't just educate folks one time. You got to come back and you got to educate them again. And that's where you come in, Mr. McConnell. Yeah, you got to just make sure that you get back out here. Every generation's got to have a group of people every time. And you have to continue to educate. So I worked with ANTHC for a really long time in water plants. You can't build a brand new water plant, go out there, train a person, and then just expect that water plant's going to run its whole 35-year design life with the same operator. You're going to have to go back and train a new operator, and you're going to have to go back again and train a new operator. And sometimes that's within 6 months, and sometimes that's within 12 years. And you just have to be flexible and educate. The problem is if you try and standardize the system, that system is going to fail if it's not built for that area. So you can standardize a lot of things in that system, but you can't just have a cookie cutter. Here's a set of modules. Here's all the same inverters and everything for that area, and we're going to build the same inverter rack everywhere. It just doesn't work that way, and it never has, and it never will.
Kolt, well said. And I think I've got one eye on the comments. There seems to be consensus and agreement there. And a reminder too that I do think we have some questions percolating in the comments section. But Ben, do you have a quick? I see your hand raised.
Well, you can veto this question. This is a question to Kolt and Jenn. This is about labor, and I'm pretty nervous that we can ramp up to the 2, 3, 5 times the scale that we're at, because that's what I see happening to my business in the next couple of years. And so I'm really heartened to hear that people, myself and others, are able to get the people that we need. but I really wonder whether we're going to be able to keep up going forward.
And I would just say, maybe not answering that question, I think that is industry wide, construction, tourism, everywhere
Right.
in Alaska. And I would second the notion that a lot of that pipeline starts in our schools. Jenn mentioned the academies here in Anchorage. We have King Tech Academy, and they're putting their foot into sort of a renewable lab that they have going, baby steps, not committing them to anything. So I think that's a pipeline issue, Ben. If you don't mind, Donovan, I'm going to toss it back to you to make sure we get at least one question in from the comment section.
Right.
Well, and I think we can sort of lump some of these together, and some have been answered. But one, just want to put a plug for ANEEE in here in the chat. I'll include the website where folks can learn more about sort of these efforts and these conversations that Chris and Jenny and others on REAP staff and in sort of our network of partnerships tackle outside the bounds of an hour-long webinar. Obviously, we've got some experts here who could speak for days, and so we appreciate any sort of future follow-up. We'll try and include contact materials. But there was, just on that topic of education and then also the academies as well. There is one question in the chat from Robin Smith, and I'll just read it off here. But could ASD install solar panels on every school using students or others from the academies? Just seems that if they go through that whole process, it could encourage them to become electrical engineers. So a lot of interest in that, and sort of I'll throw that question out there. Maybe also ask you all to sort of offer some final remarks before we can wrap it up here. But yeah, anyone want to take that one?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. Often we get asked about schools, and there's interest from teachers. It really comes down to the funding and the investment. And I've seen a large amount of trouble getting the funding that's available to actually do that. Love the idea. Jenn, you know a lot about investment and getting people, over the threshold with that. And it's hard. It's especially hard for something with the constraints that a school district has.
Yeah, it's like painful because solar is so simple, but funding solar is extremely complicated. And potentially with the changes to the IRA with the direct pay options, non-for-profit entities can now get those tax incentives. And so, but yeah, I mean, a lot of this does, sadly, it does come down to funding, but another alternative too is, could a classroom, have some solar panels, and especially it might be nice too to just do like a ground mount system that they, practice installing, and then like go see some install and, go watch some installing as it gets closer to spring and people can be on roofs and we can be out in the field. So those are other alternatives, but yeah, I love the idea of like an apprenticeship, and I'm an engineer, and I found the degree, I use it all the time. But I also want to emphasize that construction doesn't always have to lead to engineering. And like, again, kind of trying to uphold the value of being in construction, and that being an equally high quality job that is valued in society. So just want to share that too.
Amen to that. We have been giving short shrift to people in the trades for way too long. And I come from an academic family, but we also build things, and we need that. And like you said, you learn from working with your hands.
And I would say I'm amazed. And even myself, when I first started getting into building, like when you're used to doing stuff on paper, you're like, oh, it's perfect, and I can edit this as many times as I want, and I'll save it to Office 365, and everything's fine. But they're like, you're apprehensive to like, well, just like, okay, now we're gonna build. It's not perfect, but it's good and it meets the requirements. But like getting people that can take something again, like from 2D to 3D building and have that construction and like install, like, oh, you could do it this, like, that's what Grace on our team is so good at. Like, she's this like 3D visualization skill that I am nowhere near close. And so, yeah, I think just valuing that skill set in society, that's a key thing, because, and I think we put engineers on too much of a pedestal. Like, they provide one piece of the puzzle, and they're not, they don't know everything. And sometimes they can get in their own way, where I've seen them come out to the field like they do know everything, and it hurts the project. And so anyway, so yeah, just I really want to emphasize that point.
My heart is overflowing. Thank you, guys.
And
Yeah, create
on that,
value in the trades.
I'll give a
Happy-
shout out to a couple orgs out there real quick. I mentioned King Tech High, Bristol Bay Career and Technical Education Consortium. They're doing that on-ramp training, Alaska Technical Center and in COTS and AvTech. So I think that there's an interest, there's an appetite to create the visibility, a sort of stepping stone to the pipeline. And I know we're running up to 4 o'clock. So I want to thank all the panelists for truly being the pioneers in this space. I think oil and gas and construction built Alaska, and I think you are 2.0. So good luck to all of you. And Donovan, do we have any more housekeeping here as we hit the 4 o'clock hour?
Yeah, I'll just thank our panelists first and foremost. What an awesome discussion. And as I mentioned, this could go on forever. And so I encourage everybody to check out the ANEEE website. We'll follow up with all sorts of materials and ways of engaging with these panelists and with our partners, but really hoping to just, again, continue to spark these sorts of collaborations. And my heart is overflowing. We had a great group of attendees here today. I'll include the REAP website here. Hopefully you guys are familiar with that, but we are a member organization. And as we sort of try and build out this network of folks who are working on these issues, it's really helpful to have engagement from organizational members. So I'll include a link here as well for folks who are interested in perhaps becoming members and just learning more about our work. But lastly, wanted to thank our sponsors again, CERI and the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, for making this possible. And yeah, we'll follow up with all of the resources, recording, and ways to continue to engage and collaborate. But thank you all for joining us. Thanks to our sponsors, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
The opportunity. Great to talk to you
Yeah.
all.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Appreciate everything.